Ever wondered what's going through a cricket player's mind in those crucial moments between balls? Or how a sniper maintains focus in life or death situations? Senior lecturer Dr. Jonathan Connor is peeling back the layers of the expert mind, which might just change how you approach your next big challenge. Professionally Psyched is the podcast that brings you cutting-edge psychology research and real-world insights from our psych community of clinicians, researchers, and educators alike. We're here to explore how psychology shapes our everyday lives and impacts the world around us. Hi everyone, and welcome to Professionally Psyched. I'm Jessica Muller, PhD candidate in Public Health at James Cook University, and before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge the custodians of the land on which we record, and for me today that's the Bindal and Wulgurukaba peoples. And I pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and cultures from wherever you may be tuning in from across the country. We are thrilled to be back with another great episode, with a bit of a different focus this time as we take a deep dive into the world of sports and psychology. Join Psychology Honours student Kelly Strickland as she chats with Dr. Jonathan Connor to explore the impact of emotions, pre-performance routines, extreme pressure, and more on athletes' performance and decision-making. Whether you're an emergency responder, military sniper, or budding psychology student looking to up your game, you might just find some surprising parallels from sports psychology. So grab your headphones and get ready to get professionally psyched about unlocking your inner expert. Enjoy.
Hello, my name is Kelly Strickland and I'm a fourth year psychology student at James Cook University. I'm currently studying my honours investigating everyday experiences of psychological flow. And joining me today is Jonathan Connor, or Jono, who's a senior lecturer of psychology at JCU. So welcome, Jono.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Happy to be here.
To start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Jono?
As you mentioned, my name is Jono. That's certainly what I go by with students and staff. I'm a senior lecturer in psychology at JCU, formerly sport and exercise science. So I've got a little bit of a sort of different background to most, where I came through a sport and exercise science field, completed my PhD in a sporting environment, and then I sort of moved into the psychological space just from interest with a lot of the research that I did during my PhD, which has sort of led me to working in psychology since 2023. And now I am teaching into sort of work integrated learning programs within psychology, helping students to understand, what skills that they develop in their undergrad degree and how that can be applied into the industry.
You said you came from that sports and exercise background. What drew you to that area of research?
It's funny, I think I can remember the exact moment that I fell in love with research. It was a second year subject. We were talking about working with athletes and what are the different types of factors that influence expert performance. And that is just something that really captured my attention, is understanding what are the factors that basically take someone from being a novice at a particular task and transforming them into an expert. So I decided to pursue research. I did my fourth year honours with the North Queensland Cowboys, investigating decision-making in elite athletes compared to under 20s and compared to amateur rugby league players. Found some really interesting findings that were quite impactful to their training. We found that where elite athletes look when they're trying to anticipate what an opponent does next is different amongst elite athletes compared to under 20 development level players and novices. From there, I decided to pursue a PhD, and I was fortunate enough to get one with Cricket Australia. So that saw me move to Brisbane and work there for 4 years, basically under coaches and athletes who were looking to improve the way that they practice. At that stage, we were in a bit of a state where elite athletes were performing really well during practice, but then take them out into a game, or you'd travel overseas to a foreign environment, and all of a sudden their great practice didn't transfer. So what we did was we looked at some of the different factors that influence their performance and influence the development of their expertise, and then provided coaches with recommendations on how they can better develop and prepare athletes for that sort of elite level performance, particularly when they're going to play in new environments. From there, I moved back to Townsville. I got a job with JCU in the sport and exercise science department. Spent a couple of years teaching into motor control or skill acquisition, which is kind of my area of interest. So again, understanding how people develop skills that then lead them to either perform expertly or just generally develop that expertise. And then more recently, I've entered into the psychology space, and I'm looking at the different skills that undergraduate psych students need to then enter the industry and perform optimally.
Such a varied background, lots of different sports that you've covered there. Is that something that, you were really drawn to? You're a bit of a sports person yourself?
It's funny you say that. I would definitely consider myself a sports person. However, it wasn't the sports themselves that sort of drew me to those opportunities. I found over time that my passion was really about working with people, and in particular, working with passionate people. And there's no one more passionate than coaches and developing athletes. They are both two groups of individuals who are just extremely motivated to get the best out of each other and, to really improve their practices. So I was really drawn to working with these sort of types of passionate people. And I was also really drawn to, again, the things that influence our skill development and our journey to become an expert, whether it's in a sporting environment or any other field, particularly those that involve decision-making under pressure or under severe time constraints. Again, how can we sort of develop individuals to perform optimally in those types of environments?
Very important, I think, particularly for those people who are performing at that high level, being able to understand why they make certain decisions. So very, very interesting space. What are some of your current research projects that you've got going on at JCU?
Got quite a few projects going on, a couple that I'm quite excited about actually. I have some honours students that are looking into different mental skills that we see in cricketers, and another project actually in punters who play at the sort of college level, which is quite interesting. And so what they're essentially looking at is what are some of the skill level differences we see in the mental skills that these players adopt. So are they able to engage in relaxation, concentration, and interestingly, what kind of routines do they have? A particular area of interest, I suppose, I'm quite keen on investigating is how do athletes embed these mental skills into a performance routine? So cricket's a great example of a sport where you can kind of investigate these routines in between balls. I'm sure for anyone who doesn't watch cricket, they know that it goes for a really long period of time. And basically in between every shot, you've got a minute or two where there's nothing happening. Where there's nothing happening, that's opportunities for anxiety and nervousness to creep into an athlete's mind. And so they've got to engage in routines to try to stave off that negative emotion or automatic negative thoughts that they might experience. And so what we have sort of seen from the research is that they generally engage in strategies to switch off and avoid sort of mental fatigue, but then also specific strategies to switch back on at really key points. So we're quite interested in investigating, what are those mental skills that are adopted at the talent development level? We know it occurs at the elite level. So what does it sort of look like at the talent development level? And who helps to develop mental skills? When you talk to coaches, they often speak of avoiding the mental side of the game. They're far more focused on developing athletes technically and tactically and physically. And so athletes are often left to their own devices to develop mental skills that can help them in performance. And unfortunately, those who don't develop, really effective mental skills probably don't progress very far on the talent pathway. That's one of the big projects we're looking at. Another is looking at exactly when during performance athletes might engage in different types of routine strategies or mental skills. So, when do they think about the technique specifically? Is it before, during, or after, they hit a ball or bowl a ball or kick a ball, whatever it might be? When do they think about tactics? Again, is it before, is it during, or is it after? And then how then can we sort of provide recommendations to coaches to help them develop mental skills in athletes?
I'm sure those fourth year students are really enjoying being a part of that. One of the things you mentioned is looking at the routine outside of the performance as well. So I'm assuming you're looking at everything really, from sleep to nutrition to what they do in their leisure time. What have you found in that space?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, firstly, there are, I suppose, two really different types of routines. The first is those pre-performance routines that you're referring to. What do athletes do before a game to help prepare them mentally? And that might be as late as sort of 1, 2, or 3 days out from a performance. And then the second, far less research area is that between performance routines. So again, you're out on the field. There's a little bit of downtime. You haven't quite got the ball yet, whether you're playing soccer or rugby or cricket, whatever it might be. Again, what are those sort of strategies that you're implementing to help keep you calm, but also focused? And thinking back to your sort of research area, staying in that flow state as well. It's obviously a really difficult one to measure. One of the big challenges, obviously, is that we're asking athletes to try to recall what they do in the middle of a pitch, sort of after the fact. So really good recent evidence is coming out where we actually capture their mental state during the game. So we capture their mental skills that they're adopting in situ, using things like ecological momentary assessment. And that's a really good way of understanding what's happening in the moment and not sort of being caught out by the bias of, memory recall, for example. So yeah, that's kind of a lot of the research that we're doing with that between sort of ball routines. The stuff that happens beforehand, we've got a really solid evidence base to show that things like sleep, good nutrition, and even warming up appropriately are all really effective strategies to help perceptual cognitive skills and decision-making in the sporting environment.
I'm glad you mentioned flow. Earlier this year, I attended the Flow conference just virtually, and one of the big areas that they were talking about is elite performance and how adopting more focus on the process rather than the outcome has been really beneficial for a lot of athletes in regaining the level of performance that they may have previously had and lost for whatever reason. What's your experience with flow, and is that something that your research is aligning with as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very fair to say that the research that I do aligns quite nicely with flow. The way I think about flow stems from a lot of qualitative work that I've done with athletes and coaches, and it's really just about a sense of control. And I think of flow in a very similar way, where you can't really articulate or explain exactly what you're feeling or how you're feeling, but you just have this sense of calm and purpose about what you do. And when we spoke with athletes, that's something they keep coming back to when they're talking about their best performances. It's where they have a really clear purpose and intentionality to what they're trying to do. They know what the opposition is trying to do to them, and they feel that they have the technical capability at that moment in time to overcome what the opposition's trying to do. So it's almost a combination of a whole bunch of different psychological factors, from self-efficacy to self-belief, motivation. So I sort of think of that as a bit of the goal that we're trying to get to with athletes, is for them to feel this sense of control of their environment. And one really effective way for us to do that pragmatically is to instill in them those routines and help them to basically develop an idiosyncratic routine that's very individual to them and their experiences in the field, and then help them to incorporate that during practice. And if it sort of stops working after a while, then, coaches can come in and, have that discussion with athletes about what they think is going wrong, what they think they can do to sort of fix that routine, to get back that sense of control of the performance environment, and implement that in practice.
It reminds me a little bit, and I'm sort of outing myself here as having a bit of a background in the military in terms of doing those things repetitively over and over again, so it becomes a drill. So it's not something that's taking any cognitive effort anymore, and it's just a process that your mind and body does autonomously. So that's quite interesting as well. So for aspiring athletes that might be listening, what's your piece of advice from your research that can help even the most novice of athletes improve their performance?
I think something I'd love for not only, aspiring athletes, but also highly anxious undergraduate psychology students that could potentially take something away from the research that we do, is that, when you are sort of preparing for a high anxiety inducing situation, such as an upcoming sporting performance or maybe a end of trimester exam, that you sort of have a set routine that you can implement that will help you keep that sense of control and calmness to your situation. So for example, there are some people who might need to be upregulated. So they need strategies to incorporate into their routine that psychs them up for a performance. Maybe listening to loud music or doing some exercise before a game or an exam, for example. Or maybe there's someone who needs to be downregulated. So they need strategies within their routine that helps them to, bring their arousal level down to an optimal level. And that might be through breathing exercises or cue words, self-talk, to, help them get out of their own head and focus externally on things that they can control in preparation for their upcoming anxiety-inducing situation.
In one of the recent articles that you wrote for the conversation about what we can learn from expert batsmen in cricket, you mentioned the importance of balancing emotions. And I'm really interested to know if your research has had a look at how that skill is developed across the lifespan, and whether that plays a part in sort of whether someone goes on to become an elite batsman, or whether that can be a little bit of a, limitation to their potential.
Yeah, it's an area that, we really haven't looked at from a skill acquisition perspective. Longitudinal studies in our field are very difficult to track people over such long periods of time because so few go on to an expert or an elite level. So, amongst a group of 120 sort of under 15, under 16 academy level players, you would expect one of those players to go on and play at least one domestic level game each year. So you can imagine the population pool that we're sampling from is so small. And so it's really hard to track over time. But I think where the research is at the moment is just understanding how we can develop those skills to help athletes balance their emotions or understand, what it is that they're feeling in the moment and what cognitive strategies can help to reduce or elevate those levels of arousal for optimal performance.
Yeah, I suppose it's pretty difficult to predict who's going to be the next big star on the Australian cricket team.
Exactly right.
Are there any other sort of areas of sports science and psychology that you would like to get into in the future? Any maybe emerging trends that you'd like to start focusing your research into?
I am certainly someone who's got a pretty broad view of the research that I undertake. Again, part of my motivations is not only looking at the novice expert paradigm, the differences between them with particular emphasis on what mental skills differentiate high and low performers, but also working with passionate people, those who are really interested in sort of looking at the same things or are understanding the same things. But one area that has sort of caught my attention, and I'm still trying to work through exactly how this could be investigated following scientific principles like systematic design, looking at those mental skills that are adopted by individuals in almost life or death situations. So if you were to think about, say, fighter pilots, first responders, trauma doctors, people in situations where they are under intense pressure to make decisions with the ultimate consequence being life or death. I'd love to know what are the different mental skills that they adopt to manage those emotions that we know impact our abilities to make good decisions. So we've got a really clear idea that these very highly trained individuals have what you might call a specialized operating procedure where they've got these steps that they follow in any given situation. But of course, every situation that you experience is going to be slightly different. So then how are they able to adapt to these different situations whilst keeping that sense of control over the environment or over the situation and manage those negative emotions that influence decision making?
Yeah, that is a very fascinating area. I think there's potentially a lot of first year students listening who are going, oh, maybe if that's up and running by the time I get to my fourth year, I'll be trying to get involved in that.
One other area I just thought I'd highlight as well, again, because it sort of speaks to your background. My brother-in-law is a sniper in the military. And so we had a great conversation the other day, again, talking about decision-making under pressure and what is it to be an expert sniper. And from what we discussed, I could see that there are so many different facets to being an expert in that particular skill. You might just immediately think that there is a technical component to shooting and perhaps some small element of tactics. But obviously the way the military go about developing snipers, it's so much more than that. There's an expectation that you can be dropped out into a field. You then need to work out exactly where you are. You need to find a point in the environment that allows you sight of your target, but also conceals you from enemies. And then the way that the military goes about assessing those skills are absolutely incredible, some of which involves a 6-week training program that actually involves being assessed whilst you're on the training program, with 4 weeks spent out in the field, sleeping in a little tent under the stars.
I mean, a tent sounds very glamorous. I think most are probably sleeping in a hole, but yeah, it is a very interesting specialization. I think they must have extremely good cognitive willpower.
Absolutely. But look, I mean, I think this is the great example of research. And it's why I, for one, am so passionate about research, is because I have this area that I'm really interested in understanding expert novice differences and then how it can be applied to a vast array of different situations, whether it be sports, undergraduate psychology student exams, military. Sort of lends you that opportunity to go and explore different areas of interest while still keeping sort of that focus on what you love.
You've provided us a lot of information today. I'm sure that everyone listening is extremely hyped about potentially getting into this space. I know I am.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks for listening to Professionally Psyched. This podcast wouldn't be possible without the ongoing support of our Psych community. If you'd like to show your support or if you want us to cover anything on the pod, reach out via our emails, and don't forget you can listen to full episodes on Spotify.